Alright, response video, some guy called Ad Johnson 916. Same old bullshit argument. Let's intellectually try to make some convoluted argument to explain away the fact that somehow value doesn't exist because it's not made out of matter. I mean, it's just so fucking stupid. Let's go through this crap again.
The extent to which there is objectivity in science, math, history, geography, and all forms of human study is the extent to which external physical reality actually reflects the theories forwarded by those making claims.
Yeah, right. So the evidence adds up because there's evidence of it. Right? Is that your argument? So, alright. Can we agree? Because there's evidence?
But with morality, unless there is a concrete physical basis for moral codes, like a god, then there is no objective standard by which any particular morality can be judged.
That's silly. It's not about judging a particular morality. It's about analyzing the rationality, the logic, the intelligence of the theory. Does the theory make sense? Is there any way you can twist or turn the theory to break its rationality, its logic, its sensibility? That's the question. And the morality comes down to the word value, which you have this little thing. There you go. It's values. That's the key word, values. So all I'm contending is there is such a thing as value in the universe. That an ultimate intelligence, if there was such a thing, if there was an intelligence that had all knowledge of our universe, of every molecule, every interaction, everything, and it was to look at our universe, it could discern the fact that there is value in this, that there are sentient creatures and that they feel and that matters.
Morals are not floating around in the universe in the same way as carbon atoms.
Says you. I mean, right, you just made that up, right? You just say because something's not material, it doesn't exist. Well, what if magnetism turns out not to be a material force? That somehow it says, we don't know exactly how it works. We don't understand the mechanism. What if the whole universe itself is really antimatter? Okay, it's really just the product of the whole universe being made out of a plane of something's real that we can't interact with. And that we are only interacting with the unreal space, the non-existence of the form that the universe is made out of. And that's what all energy is. It's just an absence of the material entity existing in the form that is the universe. So we could argue then that matter doesn't even exist. And we play all kinds of stupid, idiotic, moronic, waste of fucking time games with words.
Of course, if a particular value is shared by an entire community or society, or most of its members at least, that value becomes functionally objective within that context.
No, that's not what we're talking about, though. Really not. We're not talking about functional objective, because that would be stupid, because then functionally objective a million years ago was a different definition. We're talking about the fact that if there was, to take intelligence to its grandest point, to its absolute end, that it would be able to discern that, yes, feelings did matter. They were an actual event that took place in the universe. It wasn't just nothing. It was something. Consciousness was an event. It wasn't material, but it was an event. It was a reality.
That does not mean that people from other places or other times will necessarily agree with those values. If anyone at any time might not value the same thing, then those values cannot be objective.
Duh. So that's why the statement of value should have some sort of rational premise. So you can build on that premise. And so once you define the core value, the kernel of value. So my argument to you is that there's a kernel of value in sentience. When you have a brain that is capable of feeling, there is a kernel of value created. If an intelligence that was not sentient was somehow bestowed the opportunity to feel what it felt like to die of radiation sickness, for example, it would be able to discern that this was not a fun thing to do and that it wouldn't want to do it again. It would be able to discern that it was a negative, bad nasty motherfucking thing.
But even still, people do judge as though there were an objective standard. Really, all they are doing is judging against their own personal standards, elevating the subjective perspective within.
No, they're making an argument. Okay, they have to defend what their values are, and so they have these gross, crude values. They've gotten some of the crude ones right, like, yeah, it doesn't seem like a good idea to be able to just stick a stick in somebody's eye. So they figured out that sticking a stick in somebody's eye is an immoral thing to do, unless that guy is planning on sticking a stick in your eye in some metaphorical way. And if he's going to do equal harm to you as stick poking in your eye, then you're entitled to poke a stick in his eye. But until then, the moral equation is that it would be harmful, a bad thing to do, to cause this damage and consequentially this unpleasant sensation to be incurred.
Which they are caged to a universal level. But I do not see this as an invalid or ignorant activity. I personally have my own opinions about morality, and naturally I find those who disagree greatly with mine to be morally lacking. I don't feel that my own perspective on the matter loses credibility just because it doesn't exist outside of my head.
Well, I think it does if you're making a statement like there's no such thing as an objective value. If you're going to sit there and make the argument in one hand and say there's no objective value, and then on the other hand say, well, I'm just going to go with my subjective nonsense, even though I can't qualify my subjective nonsense as being better than anybody else's because I will refuse to establish the fact that there's any premise, that there's any underlying, objective, absolute statement that defines something as good or bad. So you can't have it both fucking ways. If you're going to say that your entire perception of value is made of nothing but your subjective conditioning or some other crap that has no logical foundation, then you just can't make this argument. You can't have both. You can't eat both sandwiches or whatever the metaphor is.
Extent that other subjective conscious beings agree with me, which on many issues like rape or murder people generally do.
And that's all you need, is to have somebody validate your opinion, and therefore you qualified yourself through that, and that's all you need? You don't need to be able to say to yourself that, yeah, I can logically justify it because I know quite certainly that that's a bad thing that happened, or that's that you're quite certain of the kernel of value. I mean, if I didn't believe, honestly, in objective value, in the fact that it's an absolute fact that it's wrong, then I don't think I would be... I don't think I would worry about it then. Because I would just assume that, well, why go with conditioning? That doesn't mean anything. Why go because that asshole thinks so too? Big deal. If we're both not using rational thought to draw our conclusions, then what the fuck good is our conclusion?
I also can hold moral standards that disagree with my immediate daily activities. For instance, I feel that it is wrong to inflict significant pain or suffering.
Why are we changing now to the word feel? I mean, doesn't that blow up the whole conversation right there? I mean, what? We're going to talk about what we feel? I mean, that's stupid. And now we'll just start talking about what makes your dick erect? I mean, there's no fucking conversation there. That's pointless, irrelevant nonsense. So yes, now you've gone and you've just subjectified what might have been a rational conversation. Who cares what you feel about something? What can you logically defend?
On another creature. And yet I've only been an on and off vegetarian rather than a devout one. And I've never considered veganism, even though I know that supporting the dairy industry supports the meat industry.
Well, so you're basically just saying that you know you're falling short of what you rationally understand to be a more appropriate moral code? And so what? Yeah, so we all have done that, I suppose. I mean, we're all, because we're selfish assholes. Is there some other reason besides you being a selfish asshole that you haven't met your own standards of morality? I don't think so, right?
Or, for example, out of pure selfish interest, I will agree to paying the income taxes, 50% of which I know might go to fund either of the United States' current wars, even though I find them to be morally misguided, just because I don't want to end up in jail.
Yeah, I wonder how much income tax you pay. But regardless, won't argue the point.
And yet still, despite my hypocrisy and my own subjectivity, I could and would still defend my own moral principles in an argument because I believe they have value.
But how would you defend them? Like I said, if you say there's no absolute kernel of value underlying them, what do you defend them with? Let's see, okay, rape's wrong because it's not nice to women. And not being nice to women is wrong because I kind of think, it's not a good thing. I can't say absolutely that their feelings matter because I've declared there's no such thing as a feeling that matters because there's no proof that feelings matter. So I guess you can't really harm a woman. I mean, it doesn't really matter whether she's in the raped state or whether she's eating a chocolate-covered cherry. I mean, theoretically, those are the same states, I guess is what I'm arguing, because I'm saying there's no absolute evidence that those two states are different. Even though there's abundant evidence, even though the evidence is right there in front of us.